Hi. So the derivative is collateralized debt obligation, which is also known as CDO. So what is collateralized debt obligation or CDO? It is an asset-backed security which is backed by a pool of multiple assets, and the pool is divided into different tranches according to its risk and return, which depend upon on its collateral, and then sold to the investors. So this is a very important tool to sift risk and free up capital. So in short, CDO or collateralized debt obligation is a structured financial product which is backed by a pool of loans.
So how CDO works is it's divided into several tranches, or in simple terms as classes, starting from the senior tranches down to the mezzanine, to the junior, and down to finally to the equity tranches. These tranches, as we go from top to bottom, the risk level increases. So these tranches are promised to be paid in a sequence, which is entirely dependent on the cash flows coming from the pool of the underlying assets that it owns. In one way or the other, it is similar to a mutual fund in that it allows an investor to have a share or a portion in diversified portfolio. However, the only difference being that here the entire pool is divided into several tranches that we get to choose from. So as I said before, the senior tranches have the least risk, so therefore they have the first priority when it comes to payments, especially during any events of default of the underlying collateral. Since they are the safest, they pay lower interest rates than the junior tranches of the same CDOs. The equity tranches, which are the lowest rated and in some cases unrated, serve as the first loss position in the event of any defaults of the underlying collateral. Since they are the riskiest, they pay high interest rates. So to sum it up, if the asset that is backing the CDO brings all the cash flow that it should be without anyone defaulting, all the tranches are going to be paid. However, in case of anyone defaulting on their payments, the equity tranche is going to be the first one to absorb the loss, and if the loss is big enough, it's going to move up the tranche ladder.
So we have the general categories of CDOs. So we have some here. So let's go for cash CDOs. So what is it? So for cash CDOs, the collateral are not regularly traded in the market. So it earns its profit by fees and spread differential between the interest generated from the underlying collateral and the interest and principal it paid. For the market value, it's slightly different from cash CDOs as the collateral are regularly traded in the market. So the third one is our corporate CDO, whose collateral are mainly leveraged bonds, mortgages, and loans. So, however, in case of ABS or asset-backed securities, its collateral includes asset-backed securities like mortgage-backed securities. So it has its own two types. It includes high-grade CDOs and mezzanine CDOs. So for high-grade CDOs, it includes like residential MBS, which are backed by Prime and ALTA mortgages. Whereas in case of mezzanine CDOs, this includes home equity MBS, which are backed by subprime and junior mortgages. We have different parties that are involved in CDOs business. So the major and very important party is collateral manager, who is also known as asset manager. So basically, they are responsible for choosing the collateral for the underwriter, who then structures and arranges the transfers working along with CDO manager. So these transfers are basically sold to a special purpose vehicle, which is a subsidiary of the underwriter and an entity of its own. So this basically allows parent company to remove risky assets from its balance sheet onto the SPV balance sheet. So this is very important properties of using SPV balance sheet, as you can transfer your risk from your balance sheet. Talking about CDO manager, they are very important for the construction and maintenance of the overall CDO's portfolio, even after you issue the CDO's transfers. And they basically receive their periodic fees from the dollar amount value of CDOs. That is, the more collateral they can bring in the company, the more fees they can get. So our other parties includes credit rating agencies and financial guarantors. So in case of credit rating agency, they give ratings to different CDO based on their credit quality, whereas financial guarantor guarantee hundred of loans like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mac and Freddie Mae, etc. So what is the primary and secondary market for CDOs? So for the primary market for CDOs, it is very similar to the other fixed income securities. Only the difference is they are not publicly offered, so they don't have their prospectus, And the new issue pricing is at or very near to par, except for below investment grade tranches. So talking about the secondary trading for CDOs, it is basically conducted almost entirely over the counter. So as per the data, the secondary CDO market has grown up by the time. The annual par traded total approximately like $2 billion in 2002, which increased to $30 billion in 2005. So who are the major buyers for CDOs? Insurance companies, private banking organizations, pension funds and manager, investment manager banks, mutual funds, pension funds manager and hedge funds are the major buyer for CDOs. So these investors have different motivation behind purchasing CDOs, securities, depending on which trends they actually select. For instance, if they have a lower tolerance for risk, they can buy senior trends, as these trends are backed by high quality assets that ensure high return. However, the junior tranches are normally preferred by those who prefer high tolerance for risk, as it is backed by riskier assets that gives you high return.
So a little bit about the history of the CDOs. Drexel Bonham Lambert, which was an investment bank ran by Michael Milkins, assembled the very first rated CDO in 1897 out of different company junk bonds. So initially in the 1990s, most of the collateral that was being used for CDOs were corporate bonds and home loans, but during 1998, as asset-backed securities started to bring in higher returns, Prudential Securities became the first to launch the CDO that was comprised of asset-backed securities as the collateral. These asset-backed securities were in turn backed by mortgages, mobile loans, aircraft leases, etc. Around 2002, a lot of these asset-backed securities started to underperform, meaning that they affected CDOs as well. So the common accepted understanding here was that the wide range of assets was the problem, because a lot of these sectors, such as aircraft leases, mobile homes, were sectors that were beyond the expertise of the CDO managers. So therefore, they started to turn towards mortgage-backed securities, which they believed they did have an understanding of. So therefore, by 2004, CDOs were common and ubiquitous around the mortgage business. Mortgage-backed securities counted for almost half of the collateral in the CDOs, up from 35% in 2002. CDOs had also become really popular around 2004, 2006, and 7, as sales of CDOs skyrocketed from 30 billion in 2003 to 225 billion in 2006. A lot of other forms of CDOs were also becoming really popular, such as the synthetic CDOs, which included synthetics as their collateral, such as credit default swaps. And these kinds of synthetics made up almost 30% of the CDO collateral from 1999 to 2007. The other form that was really that was starting to get popular was the CDO squared, which included the low-rated tranches of other CDOs as their collateral. There are a lot of risks involved with CDOs, which are really apparent during the financial crisis of 2008, making the financial crisis one of the worst recessions in the US economy and making CDOs one of the worst performing securities of all time. The first risk is credit risk. So what it means is decrease in the credit quality of the underlying collateral could result in a high default risk, leading to insufficient funds to pay to CDO investors, meaning the collapse of the CDO. This risk was at the heart of the financial crisis of 2008, as poorly underwritten mortgages were the primary reason why the crisis even happened. So basically, mortgages were given to people that weren't really creditworthy because of the loose credit standards. Interest rates were also really low at that time. So a lot of influx happened because of the speculators as well, because there was a lot of speculation that price would keep on increasing. However, as losses started to happen because people really couldn't afford their payments, interest rates started to increase, credit standards started to get tightened, easy borrowing was no longer available. So this decreased the demand for mortgages along with the outflow of the speculators. So as prices of the house started to cease increasing, defaults started to happen, and that's how the housing market started to crash, and so did the CDO business. However, the CDOs were also a major proponent to this, as the CDO managers were one of the dominant buyers of the mortgage-backed securities, and mortgage issuers were continuously pumping out loans because they had ready buyers for the mortgage-backed securities. So therefore, in one way or the other, CDO became the engine that powered the mortgage supply chain. However, the very engine, that is the CDOs, failed due to the poor credit quality of the mortgages themselves. The second risk is of moral hazard. Being able to securitize and sell the payments coming from an underlying asset to the other buyer, to another party, basically transfers the risk onto them. And this can dilute the incentive of the CDO issuer to select high quality assets as collateral in the very first place. This also reduces the incentive to enforce governance and restrictions onto the obligators who bought the collateral, because the risk here has already been virtually passed on to the buyer. Therefore, this disregards the ethical side of this transaction. A lot of the risk can also come from credit rating agencies, as they were also partly blamed for the financial crisis, as the ratings that they were providing didn't really seem to represent the actual underlying value and worth of the CDO. As you can see, a lot of banks were selling CDOs that had low-rated tranches of mortgage-backed securities as the collateral, but even then they had they had ratings of AAA, even though the collateral really didn't justify it. So this contradiction between the ratings and the actual worth of the CDO really disregards the aspect of transparency and truth to the investors. There's also the issue of cherry picking, where the issuer sorts assets into their own account versus the special purpose vehicles account based on their own private information that they have. The other risk involved is the risk of the CDO manager risk. This necessitates the need for proper physical and human infrastructure to manage CDOs. I mean, this is fairly obvious, but since this kind of CDO deals with millions and billions of dollars, therefore emphasis really needs to be kept into these kinds of requirements, as this can be the deciding factor to whether the CDO succeeds or fails. The other risk is of the issuer diversification risk, as the diversification logic is one of the main reasons, the assumptions that creators and even investors have when buying CDOs, when creating and buying CDOs, as they believe that exposure provided by the diversified group of assets is going to provide them reliable profit in the future. However, during the financial crisis, many of the mortgage-backed securities turned out to be highly correlated, meaning that as a couple of defaults started happening, other defaults started happening as well in the mortgage-backed securities. Therefore, the diversification logic might not necessarily be true in CDOs.
So we have different regulations regarding CDOs by the time. So the first one is the Federal Commodity Future Modernization Act of 2000 that appears to make CDO activity legal and remove them from federal regulatory oversight. So basically it exempts CDOs from regulation as futures that consider them to be security-backed swaps subject to anti-fraud and anti-manipulation provision of Federal Securities Act of 1933 and the Security Exchange Act of 1934. And this prohibits the Security and Exchange Commission (SEC) for taking preventive measure against fraud or manipulation with respect to security-backed swaps. So the main entities that govern CDOs in a very indirect way would be SEC and the US federal government. The SEC has been constantly investigating cases involving CDOs, like they are reopening them and even charging penalties to institutions involved. For instance, in 2013, the SEC charged Merrill Lynch $131.8 million for misleading the investor about their collateral selection prior to the financial crisis of 2008. Moreover, the Dodd-Frank was created right after the financial crisis in order to address all the issues involved in the financial sector, which regulates CDO in more better way.
The Dodd-Frank legislation was a massive piece of financial reform legislation passed right after the financial crisis. Therefore, it's obvious that this is going to affect CDOs in one way or the other. The first component is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that was established under the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform. It is a government agency that was assigned to prevent predatory mortgage lending. So basically, they try to make sure that banks, mortgage brokers, and other financial institutions do not take unfair advantage of the investors and consumers, and they try to enforce consumer protection laws upon them. So the emphasis here can be made in that they can protect or they can prevent poorly underwritten mortgages and any other loans basically that can eventually be used as collateral for CDOs, as like I said before, the credit risk was one of the very fundamental risks involved with CDOs. The other responsibilities of the Bureau include enhancing financial education, taking consumer complaints, enforcing laws, like I said, that outlaw the discrimination in consumer finance. The second component is the Walker Rule, which restricts banks in engaging in certain investment activities with their own funds, such as derivatives and futures, and this also includes CDOs. This is to make sure that the bank's consumers are protected from the banks engaging in speculative investments with their deposit, because they involve too much risk. There's also a lot of provision for other derivatives such as liquidity default swaps, which were also a huge proponent of the CDOs through the synthetic CDOs during the financial crisis of 2008. The other component would be the SEC Office of Credit Agencies, as this was created because they wanted to address the issue of the credit rating agencies and how their ratings didn't really match the underlying collateral of the CDOs. And this agency is assigned to ensure that the credit rating agencies provide reliable credit ratings of the entities that they evaluate. Recently, CDOs have also started to get issued, especially in 2018. Will this lead to another financial crisis? Only time will tell.